Hey guys, welcome back to my channel. Today's video is going to be all about which products I personally think are worth the investment and the products that I think are worth just grabbing at the drugstore. As always, please don't forget to give this video a thumbs up. It helps YouTube know that you are enjoying the content that you are watching, and that it'll actually make this video discoverable for other people. And then also don't forget to subscribe if you want to stick around for other videos like this. Today's video is going to be part 1 of 2. In this one, I'm going to be talking all about the high-end products, and then in part 2, I'm going to be talking about the drugstore products, and I'm actually going to give you my favorite product as an example of each category that we go through. So without further ado, let's get into the video. The reason I think that base makeup products, your corrector, your concealer, and your foundation should all be purchased high-end is because at the drugstore, those products can tend to be a little bit waxy, not as pigmented, a little bit chalky in texture, the color, the pigmentation's a little bit off, and that's just from my personal experience. The products that I've used that are high-end of corrector have not been as awkward and uncomfortable to use. They don't break up underneath the eye, the color doesn't fade, it has proper pigmentation, it doesn't settle into fine lines. All those things are things that I look for in a good face product, because those are the products that are kind of setting the tone for your entire face of makeup. And if they are heavy, if they are sitting on the skin and you can really easily detect them, then I don't consider that a job well done. I think that a great makeup application is something that just enhances your natural beauty and isn't super detectable on the skin. Obviously, you're going to be able to tell that you're wearing makeup because who naturally has highlighter on the tops of the cheekbones and bronzer placed in that perfect spot and colored eyeshadow, but it shouldn't look like layers and layers of heavy makeup. So that's why I think that those products are worth the investment. Also, in the past, I found that some of my drugstore concealers and foundations that I have tried had a very heavy paint smell. And yeah, you'll find this in some high-end products as well, but I found it more common in drugstore products. It's also a lot easier to color match yourself to concealers and foundations in a department store like Nordstrom or like Sephora, wherever you're gonna go and buy those products from, as well as the bottles of high-end products tend to be a little bit more luxurious, and for that step in particular of my makeup routine, I actually enjoy feeling like I'm pampering myself with that one particular product, whereas a lot of the drugstore bottles look kind of cheap and kitschy. I like those steps to be the more exciting steps of my routine. Packaging is huge for me personally. Those are all reasons why I recommend corrector, concealer, and foundation to be bought higher end, and I'm going to show you my 3 personal favorites. For corrector, I've been using the Bobbi Brown corrector in light peach for years. This is probably like my 5th or 6th little tub of it. I just think that this does the best job ever at covering hyperpigmentation underneath the eyes and acne scars on the face. Super lightweight, very pigmented, doesn't fade throughout the day. For concealer, I love this one. This is my new favorite. This is the Too Faced Born This Way multi-use sculpting concealer. It's very high coverage. I use this everywhere on the skin. You can literally use this as just foundation as well if you really wanted to, but the smallest amount goes the longest way. I love how much product you get in here. You get ½ an ounce, and most foundation bottles are a full ounce, so this lasts a super long time, especially since it's so high coverage, and it's just such an incredible concealer, one of the best I've ever used. And a foundation that is incredible. It has a very natural finish to the skin. It doesn't look too matte, it doesn't look too dewy. It has buildable coverage, so you can sheer it out or build it up. It's just a great foundation all across. It's the Too Faced Peach Perfect Comfort Matte Foundation. It's such a great foundation. You guys can see that mine's completely empty. I'm actually about to order a new one at the Sephora sale. So next up, I want to talk about setting powders. Setting powders I definitely recommend investing in. I find that they are more finely milled. The fragrance is not as extreme. The color is the right color. It's very hard to find a actual translucent setting powder. A lot of the time they're too white in undertone or they're too beige in undertone. They're just like an awkward undertone. So I literally swear by the Laura Mercier translucent setting powder. I have gone through so many of these. This is my all-time favorite setting powder. I recommend this to everybody to buy just because it is so finely milled. It doesn't look heavy on the skin. You can't tell that you've set your face with powder. It's just mattified the areas that need to be mattified, set the areas that need to be set without looking like you have powder on your skin. And it also stays set. So for example, something like this, the Rimmel Stay Matte Powder from the drugstore. This is a decent setting powder. It does the job. But I do find that after an hour or two of me having set my face with this, my skin almost like becomes tacky again. It doesn't stay set. It's the weirdest thing. Next up, bronzers. Definitely worth the investment. All the ones that I've tried from the drugstore have been kind of chalky in the formula, and they would come off kind of dusty on the brush. So the brush wouldn't grab an even amount of product, and it would actually make the application look kind of choppy and muddy and weird. Also, the undertones were kind of just not right. They didn't have that proper amount of ashy and neutral. It was just like too warm. It was just a mess. So I decided to just invest in a high-end bronzer. One of the first ones that I ever bought was NARS Laguna. So this one has been loved to death. The packaging is absolutely disgusting and sticky now. I don't even like to touch it. It must have been in at least 2013 or 14 that I bought that bronzer. If you dig in my Instagram, like far enough down in my posts, you'll see when I posted my first photo of that. It was, I think I got it at like a Nordstrom sale or something. I can't remember when I got it, but I got it forever ago. I just repurchased it a few weeks ago. This is a brand new one. Look how pretty it is. And I don't know if this is the new packaging or limited edition packaging, but it's so pretty. So I definitely recommend a high-end bronzer. It just applies more airbrushed, more undetectable. The pigment comes on the brush a little bit better. It's creamier. It just moves better. It's just an all-around, usually better formula. Okay. Sponges, you guys. Nothing beats the original Beauty Blender, okay? I don't care how many people make their own versions, nothing comes close to how the Beauty Blender applies makeup versus another sponge, okay? This one right here is by EcoTools. I want you to just look at the difference in density of the sponge, okay? So I'm literally squishing them the exact same amount. Do you see how much bouncier the Beauty Blender is? This one is so dense, it's like, I actually have to try pretty hard to squeeze it all the way through. This one's just like beep, beep, beep. This one's like, you can see the difference. This is just a way denser sponge, and this is dry obviously, but even when it's wet, this still feels super dense, which means that it's not gonna do as good of a job as picking up your excess product, applying the foundation seamlessly, and looking airbrush. It just doesn't do the same because it doesn't have that same bounciness. I don't know how to explain it, you guys, but if I compare my skin using just a regular beauty sponge versus the Beauty Blender, you can literally see the difference. Like, you will not be able to detect any foundation on the skin after I've pushed it and blended it with a Beauty Blender. But with any other sponge, you'll kind of almost see it still sitting on the surface of my skin. So, I don't know, just not a fan. Also, I feel like this one just stays too wet and it almost takes product away. So, definitely, I know that a Beauty Blender is expensive, but they last so long if you take care of them, and it's just one of the best tools that I've ever purchased and repurchased and repurchased and repurchased. Now, the last thing I'm going to talk about is eyeshadow. I definitely think that it is so worth it to invest in just one great neutral high-end palette. The way that the powders of the shadow are formulated in a higher end palette are just so much more blendable, so much more pigmented. They are not as chalky. A lot of the time when I was testing out drugstore eyeshadow palettes, no matter how much I dipped my brush into the shadow, it just wasn't picking up enough product. Or if it did, as soon as I would put it on the eye and start blending, it would disappear, which was so frustrating. So I think that it's just worth buying that one palette that you're gonna use all the time. If you haven't been a subscriber of mine for a long time, then you wouldn't know what my first palette was. Now, the Lorac Pro, this is the original palette that I bought however many years ago it was now. And I use this palette to absolute death. I used to use these two brown shades as powder to fill in my eyebrows. I used to use all these obviously as like transition shades, whatever. Shimmer on the lids, and then these darker shades you don't need to use as much on the brush, and that's why they're not as dug into. And I don't usually do like a darker smoky eye, so I stayed on this side of the palette. But this is just such a great first eyeshadow palette ever. I think that this is an incredible palette. But if you're not into Lorac, I also think that the Too Faced Chocolate Bar palette is another great neutral beginning palette. I don't really find a use for like these shades right here, but everything else I think is great in this palette. I do think that they're kind of missing like that dark chocolate brown and maybe a black in here, but it's still a great first investment palette. I just really never found a drugstore palette that I was like, oh yeah, I want to use this because it compares to other palettes that I have that are higher end. No, sorry. And very unpopular opinion, but I actually am not a fan of Urban Decay at all. People ask me all the time if I've tried their whatever palettes. I had the Naked 3 palette years ago. I never used it. I don't think that their products are that great, except for their concealer. That's the only product from Urban Decay that I personally own. Alright, so that sums up today's video. I hope that you guys found it helpful. Stay tuned for part 2 that is coming next week, and I will link it down below if it's already live by the time you're watching this video, and I'll put a card up here so that you guys can just click through to the next part. I'm going to be talking about all my drugstore picks and why I think they are comparable products at the drugstore for those particular steps, and I bet that you can kind of dissect and use some deductive reasoning to which steps I'm going to be talking about in part 2. If you like this video, please give it a thumbs up and don't forget to subscribe so that you don't miss future videos. Thank you so much for watching, and I'll see you in my next one. Bye.